episode 270 of the 20 Minute Tims podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm joined by Martin Melly.
You are?
And Stephen.
What's happening?
Plenty.
That was quite kind of mid-morning, like DJ reply there. I said, what's happening, guys? What's happening?
I thought you nearly slagged me. I thought you were going to call me like the George Bowie of Celtic. Well, it's fair. Could I do what George Bowie does? No. Could George Bowie do what I do?
No, I think
either.
He knows that.
And
to be honest, I think he knows that.
I think he knows that. Listen, before we begin, we are on YouTube. Just want to say thank you to everyone who watches us. I'll look at the camera here for the massive and wonderful response that we've had on YouTube. It's been quite overwhelming. The numbers this season since Celtic started to be good again.
Funny that.
You glory hunting bastards has been tremendous. So if you're watching us on YouTube or you're listening to us on Spotify or Android, just want to say thank you very much. I'm not going to spend much time plugging the Patreon. We'll do that thing underneath here again as we point to here, and Mark the editor will put up patreon.com/20minutetims, and he'll do the thing, Stephen, where he puts up the website and you see what the website, and it shows you what's on offer. Basically, Patreon is a website that allows you to support this podcast in exchange for extra content. Big, huge week of football coming up for Celtic. If you've been thinking about the Patreon, this is the week to do it. European ties away. We'll be doing a live preview show. We bring you the big match build up for that live before kick-off for both games this week. Away to the Huns and away to Alkmaar. We'll be live. We're doing match reactions. We're not going to the Rangers game. We'll talk about why.
No.
We'll talk about why. We're going to do reaction podcasts. We follow the Colts. We do Celtic history. We've got a new podcast coming out where we go around the Celtic supporters clubs and discuss all that sort of stuff. Look, it's brilliant. Check it out. Patreon.com/20minutetims. Stephen, I alluded to it in the Patreon plug there. Massive week of football for Celtic. That was a big test. We were speaking about Ange's progress on the podcast last week. And what we were saying was, look, it's been great, but let's just keep our powder dry a wee bit here, because some of the opposition has been dug meat. We've played Pedigree Chum, we've played Chappie, we've played other brands of dog meat.
Yeah, get in touch. Dog meat brands
are available. And we were worried about the AZ. There was big questions over what that Ange up against a quality European outfit would look like.
No doubt. That was I'm not going to say it's the last remaining test, because I think an equally big one is round the corner for us, and we'll talk about that a wee bit later on. But as far as the quality of opposition goes, what we said last week, or what I said rather last week, was that my only worry about this going in is that we might get caught on the hop a wee bit, much like Midtjylland, much like Hearts. We just weren't ready for those games, and this is just an undeniable step up in quality from Dundee, without wishing to be disrespectful here, without calling them dug meat. We may have already done.
That's our kind of dug meat.
Exactly. I'm trying to find the words to describe Dundee without being disrespectful, as Akon once said.
Can't find the words to describe Dundee without being disrespectful. There we go.
Exactly, that direct quote. But there was no doubt that this was a step up in quality, and Celtic handled it pretty damn well, I have to say. I mean, I didn't give them a hope in hell of keeping a clean sheet, never mind coming out there where I wouldn't call it comfortable victory. There were a few moments in there, but it's all part of the development. We're getting better, we're developing into these games, we are growing into ourselves a bit here, and played it against a decent team. Now, I think, as I said on our video with Celtic Fans TV after the St Mirren game, I said that it's almost like the season properly starts next week, for very obvious reasons. We're playing Rangers, and I know people will be like, "Oh, you don't want to make it all about them." That's not what I mean. I mean that for us to fully gauge where Celtic are just now, we need to have a reference point, right? And we've never played AZ Alkmaar before, and there was a danger that we might just be overrating them. Going in, we just didn't know. When we play against Rangers, we'll know exactly where we are, because of last season, the dreaded couple of words last season. But as far as Alkmaar goes, a perfectly professional and solid night's work from the old Tick.
I absolutely loved the game. It was just one of those ones. But recently we've seen Celtic come on every week, I feel, and this was the one we felt, right, there's still a few questions to ask. No doubt we can blow teams out the water in Scotland.
For sure.
That's fine, but you're sort of feeling like, right, that's us back in the stadium. We got past that, then the full crowd, and you feel like, yes, I've got my club back, I've got the thing I go to. But that game on Thursday, I had a few questions about Celtic, but I was going into it without fear. I was like, do you know what? We'll go up here and we'll see what we're made of, and see if we don't play well. I still think we can get there, but to play that well and to go toe-to-toe with a very good team and to beat them and keep a clean sheet, and we did ride our luck, but we could have scored more as well. But the most important thing for me was coming out the game, or maybe it was into the next day, because that way when a good result, it builds into the next day and you just remember it, you give the odd yes during the day, but the same with a bad result can lead into the next day. But the next day I was just like, every so often I was like, yes, and I was like,
to yourself,
just to myself, a wee yes. But I just felt, and I just stopped myself doing it and realised that yes, I've got my club back, but this time I felt like I've got my team back. I've got something to believe in again. I can go every week and think, this team's going somewhere. Well, this is the start of something, and I said it on the reaction thing. But even if Celtic have a bad week this week and we maybe lose one of the games, I still think we'll get back on track, and this is going to be a really good season. And as I said, the start of something that could be very, very special.
The reaction thing, by the way, we're getting good at these Patreon plugs. For the reaction thing is what we did after that. Yeah.
If you want to sponsor this podcast, we will do a wonderful job selling your business. The game for me, I was just excited to get back to Parkhead again. And we were speaking about this Celtic, Stephen rather, on the St Mirren game. It just feels, even on the walk up to the game, that's what we were saying to each other, how different, how excited you feel to go and watch your team again. It's brilliant. And sort of more focusing back to football, though, I was really curious to see how Ange would approach this game. Would he change up his philosophy? Would we see Celtic change formation? Would we be more conservative? No. That is not in the Ange Postecoglou playbook, is it, Melly?
No, there will be slight tweaks, but with a team like this, it's maybe a 50-50. So this is Celtic's level, and this is why it was so important to me, because it was a team that in the past we should be able to beat this team. We should be going into this and thinking we can do something here. But recently we've been just beaten down so much with the European results that you think we are going to struggle in any sort of European football. But if we can beat a team like this, like the Dutch league is a very good league. They finished a point behind PSV. This was a decent team, and I know they sold a couple of players, but this was a team that if Celtic are going to do, I don't know about doing something in Europe, but this is what we want to see, competing against teams like this, because Celtic should be. We've got the resources, we've got the budget, but now we've got the manager and we're starting to get the players in, and it was only 4 signings that started that game, so there could be more to come. And when Celtic get their squad together going into this, but that's it, they didn't change their style and they went toe-to-toe and they were brilliant. They were brilliant at points, and AZ couldn't live with us. We've seen it with St Mirren, Dundee, the Dundee game before, and Hearts and all that. They can't live with us. European teams struggle against us as well, because everybody knows their job, everybody knows what they're doing, but we attack, and it's brilliant to watch.
Relentless, Stephen. And this is the thing, we've always kind of said when you're watching Celtic, attack's the best form of defence. We shouldn't be put off by these teams. How many managers we shouldn't be? And Brendan Rodgers tried it. He tried it against PSV and PSG and Man City, and it kind of backfired. And Barcelona backfired against us a wee bit. But this is how you want to see Celtic approach these games, and that just screams to me about ultimate buy-in that these players have got in the manager, the confidence these guys have got, and we'll talk about some of the players, but the confidence these guys have got to approach this game. This Celtic team here, never in a million years. At any point last season, never a million years last season, did they approach any game against any opposition, let alone one as daunting, as important as this, with the fire and the relentlessness and the complete buy-in to the manager's plan that they approached this game here.
Well, the players deserve...
Compare this to Spartak, for example, for last season.
Sparta, what's your cut off though? Just the K come off there. The players deserve an awful lot of credit for this as well, because as we've been discussing on a couple of podcasts recently as well, you might think, well, Ange Postecoglou has come in and improved all these players, and there's no doubt he has, but the players need to buy in as well. The players need to allow themselves to be open to new ideas in order to get better as well. It's not, I mean, it'd be the easiest thing in the world for, and I know a couple of players have, but for more players to have just left this sinking ship that we experienced last season as well. So to go from what we did last season to now, and it looks as if like no one has become disillusioned with it. Everyone is fully buying back into what it means to be. I mean, it sounds a bit trite and all that, but to be a Celtic player, to live up to the expectations that we rightly or wrongly put on these players, but everyone seems to be fully bought into it. And really, I couldn't really fault any current players. that any of the players that are currently hovering in and around the first 11, or the 3 or 4 players that we've been using other than that, they've all been to a man almost, well, kind of perfect, really. Kind of, apart, Starfelt has had a shaky start, but other than that, everyone has been doing their job, perfectly well, and everyone involved. Again, that kind of sounded like I wanted to praise the players more than the manager. I mean, we wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for the fact we've got an absolute gem that looks like of a coach on our hands here.
Yeah, for sure. Melly, players. Joe Hart. Big questions over Joe Hart coming into the Celtic team. Is he going to fit into Ange's system? There was a lot of people out there just outright saying he is not an Ange Postecoglou goalkeeper. He doesn't fit in Ange's system, which I thought was absurd because Ange is the guy that signed him. But obviously, you can understand why people might have thought that, given that Joe Hart was a hangover from last year. Ange Postecoglou's brought him in. He's come up with some big saves already.
Yeah,
and another one in this game.
Yeah, right at the start of the game, and if that goes in, just imagine if he doesn't get that touch with his foot that takes it on at the post. That's 5 minutes into the game, you're a goal down, and it's instantly, we're in for another one here, lads. This is going to be another tough European game.
They'd had a couple of attacks by that point as well.
Yeah. And it took Celtic a wee bit to get in it, but I felt that save with his foot really invigorated everybody, the fans and the players, because when you've got a keeper like Joe Hart, that is
how much confidence does it give you?
100% more confidence in his defence and himself. So that just goes like, we've got somebody there. If we make a mistake, well, Starfelt made a couple of mistakes early on, and Hart bailed him out. Like, yeah, right, okay, we can go on from there. He's made that save. Let's start the game from here, and that's what Celtic done. And this is what it's all about. Like, yes, Joe Hart's not the best with his feet, but he's good enough. He's good enough. There's maybe one position in Ange's system that he can maybe say, right, I don't need the best player for that because he'll do other things. Goalkeeper stops goals.
Yeah.
And if he didn't do that, if we had one of the other 2 keepers, they don't save that, Celtic go down, and that's a completely different game. And this is why you buy Joe Hart. And then we see later on in the game towards the end, he brings something completely different, and we'll talk about that later because I want to bring that up. But the save, he made a couple of decent saves, but that one with his foot was game-changing for me.
Yeah, the Joe Hart thing, I know Melly said we'll talk about it later, but let's talk about it just now.
It's technically later.
Yeah, because as soon as that left Melly's mouth there, Melly's beautiful mouth, I immediately wanted to talk about it because it was on the tip of my tongue there as well. We talked a lot in recent seasons as well about the intangibles, the intangible qualities that players have, Scott Brown, Mikael Lustig and all that to varying degrees. And we talked a lot about leadership, about how last season we had to have, or we basically were completely bereft of it. We had guys like Shane Duffy who just didn't work out for. We had Scott Brown who was ailing and towards the end of his career with Celtic. We had nothing like that. So we brought in a guy like Joe Hart who immediately seems to have taken on, whether he was given it or not, he has taken it upon himself to be something of a leader on the pitch.
It's almost like he came in and went, "This is my job here. This is my job to be a leader. I'm not here." He's not taking a couple of weeks to figure out who's the guys that change it. Joe Hart's went, "I'm going to use all my 15 or whatever years experience of top flight football, and I'm going to give this team it all."
Yeah, and that's what I mean by that's why we call it an intangible, because stuff like that's not going to show up in stats. You don't have expected communication or anything like that. Expected rants at defense. Every time he goes behind the goals,
bollockings per 90.
Every time he goes behind the goals, I'm immediately reminded of that. Remember the famous video of him kicking the balls and all that? Give me the ball. Well, I'm immediately reminded of that. Just it's because it's still so weird seeing Joe Hart in Celtic colours, but yeah, that's what he has brought so far. And people might think that's not particularly important, but to me, especially in that game, it was crucial because he was the guy who was communicating with Ange. I mean, it wasn't the other way around. It wasn't like you see a manager's giving the whistle to a player and the players all have turned around and he's relaying. It was the other way around. Joe Hart was shouting on Ange at one point. And he was trying to communicate something about where he wanted him to be, and he was demonstrating something with his feet. I couldn't work out what it was, but it was obviously it was towards the end of the game where you talk about game management and things like that. He was getting involved in that, and then there was the moment that probably everyone has seen where he actually physically grabs Callum McGregor and a couple of others. Was it Welsh and Starfelt? Actually grabs them by the collar and brings them all in to have like a discussion about what they're going to do for the next 6 or 7 minutes of the game. This is really important. How many times did we hear about how Barkas has just no got that.
No.
He just can't communicate with his defenders. Yes,
he's a mime.
Yeah, and it's not even a language thing. It's just not within him to take control of situations like that. Scott Bain doesn't either. He doesn't have a language barrier either. So, yeah, it's, to me, Joe Hart makes all the sense in the world at this moment. Yeah, we might find out that he's going to make mistakes. I don't really care about that. He's a goalkeeper, but it's like...
Of course he is. And that's when all the chat will come out about, he's going to misplace a pass, and then that's when all the chat's going to come out about how he should never be at Celtic and all that sort of stuff. Just before, I know you're signalling to talk there, Mel, just before you jump in, just very quickly, see when Callum McGregor gets subbed against St Mirren, did anyone else think he was about to give the armband to Hart?
Yeah,
possibility, wasn't it?
I thought it, and then he gave it to Ryan Christie, who looked as surprised as almost everyone else.
Too soon for him. It was like that bit at the end of that terrible Indiana Jones film, The Crystal Skull, where that idiot Shia LaBeouf picks up the hat and he's about to put it on, and Harrison Ford whips it off him and puts it back on his own head.
I hope you've not seen that film.
Probably not. It's absolutely dreadful. I wouldn't recommend it, but it reminded me very much of that moment.
Melly, save us.
Yeah, just on Joe Hart, I was thinking about it in the terms of what Celtic needed, and look, Joe Hart will make a mistake that, okay, everybody's going to do that, but because he's a keeper, because it's back there, but he probably doesn't make as many misplaced passes as other players, but because he's a goalkeeper, it's highlighted more. But the thing about Joe Hart I really love is he's not the best keeper Celtic can get. Celtic could maybe get a better keeper, but he's the ideal keeper for Celtic because he's got everything they need, and it's more the leadership qualities he brings and that sort of captaincy where he's not a captain. Like, you can say, oh, he's maybe a vice captain. He's choosing to be a leader without being chosen to be a leader. He's taking it upon himself, and Celtic could have went out and got some 23-year-old keeper that's going to be brilliant at some point, but right now the best keeper Celtic can get is Joe Hart because he brings everything they need.
I hope Joe Hart's loving his football.
He looks like he is.
Full stadiums compared to what he was doing, like bit part here, there and everywhere for the last couple of years. I really hope Joe Hart's enjoying his football.
Just a final thing before we move on from Joe Hart. Where else in the pitch could we possibly get that? Like, someone who ticks
a goalkeeper.
You're not allowed on right wing. Where else could we get an experienced goalkeeper for right wing? But what I mean is that, forget the fact that he's 34. That's nothing for a keeper anyway. It doesn't concern me in the slightest. That's perfectly still within the realms of a peak athleticism for a keeper, I would say. But where else would we be able to get a guy who brings all those qualities that we've just finished talking about?
Let one go.
Yeah, exactly. But a guy who's won the English Premier League, a guy who brings in 75 international caps or so. So again, I feel like I'm making I'm protesting too much about Joe Hart here, but I think it's important to acknowledge what he has done in a short space of time, just like Ange has. I mean, let's face it.
Kyogo.
The guy.
Pause, let me just stop before we talk about Kyogo though. Tommy Rogic. Oh my God. I mean, a couple of touches on the ball there. Oh, sexy feet is back. And a couple of touches before he put that ball. I mean, the flick, he brought out a velvet cushion for somewhere and laid the ball down on the ground with it, and before he put it in the box for Kyogo, who was tremendous. But Tommy Rogic, back to his best. We're going to, I don't know how many weeks we're going to have to say this, but revitalised Tom Rogic, and terrific for that Kyogo goal.
Oh, tremendous. And just at the first couple of minutes of the game, where Celtic were feeling their way into it, there was a point where one of the midfielders just sort of went past him, and I was like, oh no, Tom, is this a step too far for you? But he grew into the game, and thought that the piece of work he done for the goal, where it's just delightful to watch, the feet, and then the cross is inch perfect. But just when Celtic are trying to attack and the ball breaks out, but Callum McGregor's there and he just nods it to Rogic, and I was like, the team know the system so well that Callum McGregor was in the exact right place, wins the ball, plays it to Rogic, who's in the exact place to cross it for your striker, who's in the right place at the right time. And this is by design. This isn't luck that he won that head on that. They all know what they're doing, and when they know what they're doing, they can go out there and play their football and express themselves. And that's what Tom Rogic is when he's at his best. He can go and take that ball, and there's nothing better than watching Tom Rogic in full flow.
Do you know what I'm thinking watching Tom Rogic? I'm thinking that Ange Postecoglou, right? Imagine with a blindfold on, and he's describing the exact sort of player he needs in that position. I need a guy who doesn't need to be particularly athletic. I don't need him to do back and forward, run about. I just need him to have great touch, great vision, great ability to pass. he's like, I kind of need, like, you know, is that guy Tom Rogic still kicking about? He's in the back.
Well,
but he's added the things you said. I don't need him to do this. He's added that to his game this season, and that's what makes it so good as well.
Well, I quite literally said that is Turnbull, just as him as an example that I used. Is Turnbull going to be able to recreate the 2016-17 Tom Rogic? Is he going to be able to the creative fulcrum of the side? Now, it turns out Tom Rogic is going to be 2016-17 Tom Rogic. He was right under our noses the whole time. Early days.
Yeah, right? Very.
Let's discuss this.
He will get injured at some point.
Let's discuss this in November, December, January time and see if he's still having such a good time. But suffice to say, at this moment in time, it's just great seeing him back, looking like he enjoys his football, like so many of these guys do, compared to, you know, see these two words, man.
You're banned.
Just stop saying last season. But I don't. Last season is a reason to celebrate as well, because that's the benchmark that we're comparing all this amazing stuff against. So that, in a way, it's quite a positive to consider.
We've got something else to talk about later in the podcast. It won't be the last time we're mentioning last season. So why don't we just have, you know, an amnesty on it? This podcast is going to have a lot of references to last season, given the fact that Neil Lennon was on Sportsound talking about last season. James Forrest, another European goal for Celtic. Melee. We've had a couple of sniffs about James Forrest on this podcast, but again, I'm willing to write all that off. Another player who probably deserves a fresh, clean sheet.
Slate?
A fresh slate, that's what I want to say. A clean slate under Ange Postecoglou.
Yeah, he was, seeing the first half, he was right in front of me and Stephen, and I just felt he wasn't getting in the game. And at the game, I was getting frustrated with him because I felt, is he hiding? But since then, I've sort of changed my stance on that, because it looked like when Greg Taylor had the ball or somebody in there, he was sort of in beside the fullback, not making an angle for the pass. Like, I could see where Taylor should play the ball, but Forrest wasn't dropping. He was always behind a player, and it was frustrating me. But then I was thinking, look, James Forrest, been there and done it. He's got nearly 100 goals and 100 assists for Celtic. He's played in these games. Don't quite think he's hiding, but over on that left-hand side, it just doesn't suit him, because he's receiving the ball the wrong way, and I think that's why I felt he was doing that. But into the second half, he was another one that sort of grew into the game. But Forrest has got a good few goals this season. He's assisted a lot. I don't think he's played that well for James Forrest. There's so much more to come from him, and I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt right now, because the team's playing well, so we don't need to rely on him. But also, he's barely played 10 matches in a year. So if we can build James Forrest back up to where he can get to without having to play him every game, because we've got the options to do that now, it's another good player to have in our hands. And as the game went in, and he gets that goal that deflects off somebody, but you make your own luck in that. And just on that goal, it's one of my favourite goals we've scored this season, because I was speaking to Stephen with it before we came on here. When you watch it, AZ play out from the back, and you see it is Rogic is closing down the sort of right centre half or right back, and then he shouts over, so Edward comes over behind him. Turnbull goes out to close down the guy with the ball, and Kyogo's there. So Celtic have created this sort of square around these three players. They can't get out. And Kyogo, once Turnbull wins it back, he plays it into Kyogo, nutmegs the guy as he plays it to Forrest, and then we score. And with both goals when they went in, it's been a long time since I've felt like that at Celtic Park on goals. Obviously we've not been there, but that sheer elation. The first goal was tremendous, but that second goal, we could win this game, and we were flying at that point.
On James Forrest, I mean, the focus has quite rightly been on guys like Kyogo and Abada and Turnbull as well, because these guys are the kind of shiny new toys, and Turnbull is still developing as a Celtic player as well, so there's been a lot of focus on these guys. But we've got guys like James Forrest, who, as Melly said, I agree, hasn't been setting the world alight so far this season, but he's got 3 goals already. I mean, quietly, these guys are ticking away and getting, we'll probably get the top 4 or 5 scorers in the country already across
top 5 in the league.
The top 5, I'm not surprised.
Ralston's one of them.
Ralston, of course, he's another one who's get more than his fair share of goals already. So we've got these guys.
Contract.
Yeah, why not?
These are all coming.
I've been saying it for months, man. I don't know what you're talking about.
I've been saying it for years.
Can I just shock you? I think Anthony Ralston should get a new contract, despite what I said
Can I
earlier.
just shock you? I, honestly, just a second. I think it's a disgrace that the board have not given Anthony Ralston. See if that boy's in the same money he was on for the last couple of years. Disgrace. Get it jacked right up.
Exactly.
Match highest earner clause right out of Football Manager. Give him one of those, Melly. We need a minute. Obviously, Celtic got a clean sheet in this game. Sadly, no away goals. Clean sheet at home and then scoring one over there would have probably killed the tie for us. How do you think our approach might differ to the away game? Because the tie's not over, isn't it?
No, I think we need to. Ange said, look, it's a new game. We need to go with the way we're just go as if it's 0-0. And we had that chance at the end where the three chances were Edward, Ralston crosses at Edward, the keeper saves it. The second save from Edward's header is unbelievable, and then Montgomery comes in. But Celtic just need to go into this with a fresh mindset. It's still the exact same. We can maybe tweak it a wee bit defensively, and maybe there'll be a wee change or two, but we have to go in there with the thought we need to score, because look, in this, we always do this as Celtic fans and as football fans. It's Celtic away in Europe, but Ange Postecoglou go, hold on a minute, I've only played 2 games away in Europe, so
we're just saddling with that baggage.
That's nothing to do with me. So Celtic have had 2 away games, 1 good, 1 bad, but the results wise, but I thought both performances were good. So if Celtic go and perform like they did in those 2 away games, we should be okay here. But I still feel if Celtic lose or go out this tie, I won't be too down on it, because I know how Celtic can play, and it will just be another one like Stephen said. This game's come a wee bit too early. Come September, October, Celtic could dispatch AZ pretty handily over 2 games, but I still think we can go out there and do it, and just what we need to do is keep it going, because there's nothing wrong with it. Yes, we might concede, but with every game we have a chance of scoring. I've got a wee feel like this has nothing to do with anything, but I've got a wee feeling it might be like the Stuttgart game where Celtic won 3-1 at home, went away in the UEFA Cup run and get 2 early goals, just blew them out of the water and then sat back. But I just feel like Celtic have got that in them to go away and score goals.
We definitely have it in us to score goals, Stephen. It's going to be a tough tie. Do you think Ange will change his approach, or do you think more of the same?
I think Melly's right. I think we might see the odd tweak. I wouldn't have been surprised had he played any part in the St Mirren game. I wouldn't have been surprised to see maybe James McCarthy come in, maybe shore things up a little bit in midfield.
It's going to be a slow burn with him, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised to see something like that. I don't know if Sorrow has got the same chance of playing that a fit McCarthy would have had. Yeah, so I don't see it being too different, to be honest. But I mean, see when we're talking about this, and I felt it coming from Melly as well. It's like the confidence we're now displaying, just as his fans, the confidence we've got in this team has gone through the roof in a very short space of time. And I know that might be slightly misplaced. We'll find out, but that's
you have to enjoy it. Well, let's see if boy, we did enjoy it.
We deserve this.
Exactly, it's the nature of being a football fan. If we're getting carried away, then so be it. That's what it's supposed to be like. But the point is, it's like, in every single game now, you can see Celtic scoring at least 2 or 3 goals. I mean, the way they're starting games, particularly, and we spoke about it last week as well, the first half hour of these games is absolutely electrifying. And I don't mean to get carried away here. I'm genuinely mean that. I'm not being like hyperbolic there. I'm sitting watching these games and I'm thinking to myself, this is better than I've seen in years.
It really is. Yeah.
Don't want to get carried away. We've had Brendan Rodgers, which is great as well, but to have gone from what we saw in the first couple of games where we were all panicking, we were all talking about we've not getting these players in quickly enough, and that's probably still the case, but to have gone from the first couple of performances of the season to me potentially talking about some of the best football I've seen in years and years, my entire life of being a Celtic fan, is quite the turnaround. I think we can all agree. Just
before we move on, you were talking about Ange's approach, and yes, he does start games and go at things the right way, but seeing that AZ game, he made changes towards the end that the balance of the game could have swung, and he made substitutions, even with the Joe Hart thing, I think, where I think that was to go, look, there's only a few minutes to go, let's just go long. And we brought on Edward, and he was a sort of focal point for us to hit. He's not the most physical or the best in the air, but he's got more power than Kyogo, so to bring him on, and we could hit it into the channels just just to see the game out, because that's what it needed. We brought on Sorrow, I think we brought on McCarthy and Sorrow and shored it up. It's Ange's got his way of playing, but he's not afraid to make changes that will shore games up, and it was good to see that as well.
There's a lot of calm in the stand, isn't there? There's a lot more calm in the stand now. You don't have people screaming for substitution.
I don't know about that, mate.
Do you not
I've still got the guy behind me saying just punt it up the pitch. Come on.
I've got the guy beside me and went, are you the guy that does that blog? Well, it's a YouTube show, mate. And they made me put it in his phone, so hopefully he's watching, because I had to search it for him. Stephen, you said the Celtic are more exciting now to watch than ever. Doesn't it get more exciting than 2-6-0 wins back to back, surely?
No, I'm loath to get carried away because we started last season. There it is again.
Well, last time we played St Mirren,
they
lost 2-1.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at that. That's what we said after the game as well in our reactions and our video with the excellent Celtic Fans TV. We're now doing some crossover content with Paul over there. It's only humping St Mirren. If you take that in isolation, it's not that impressive. But might I remind everyone, these are the exact teams who are turning up to Celtic Park with no fear whatsoever and getting results.
Any 6-0 wins impressive.
Yeah, of course it is, but it's even more so in this particular set of circumstances when you consider that these teams are just turning up and routinely getting results at Celtic Park. Would they drop
17 points? 17 games we dropped points in last season.
And look at that. I actually saw the highlights of that St Mirren game. That was the one where Shane Duffy was playing. God bless him, he's back playing well and all that now in Brighton, but there was that goal where he was tight to that Durmus, I think it was, so the ball came down, but by the time the ball hit the net, he was further away from the player than when the move started. Absolutely incredible. But it's encouraging now if Celtic can start to build some sort of fear factor back into.
I think it's here.
Exactly.
I mean, we said before the game, didn't we, that there's a couple of things that we wanted to give St Mirren a miserable day, and within 20 odd minutes they were a man down and 2-0 down, and Alan Powell's ridiculous challenge, and there was a lot of that in the game. But 20 minutes into that St Mirren game, Melly, those players must have had the pampers out.
Exactly, and it's another one. It's a home game after a tough European tie. Excuses were there for Celtic. There was excuses there to go, do you know what, maybe it'll just be a 1-2-0 win. Absolutely blew them away, and it's this relentless start again, just not giving teams a second in there. Like, I was watching the game again, making notes, and in the first half I had more notes than I think I had, like chance wise for Celtic, than I had
Poindexter.
Professional.
What
do you come reading off? I had more notes in that first half about good clear-cut chances for Celtic than I remember in full games for any game last season. Celtic were basically carving them open at will, and it's a lot of times under Lennon and sometimes under Rodgers, Celtic would have the ball for having the ball's sake. There's always an end game here. There's always a chance that comes from it here, and that's what we love.
But how many times last season were we watching Celtic and it was just like Scott Brown passing the full-back, getting it back, passing, like nothing happening, no penetration at all.
That's what I'm getting at when comparing these games to the exact same fixtures we've seen previously. This, as I say, St Mirren turned up to Celtic Park and won fairly comfortably just last season, just this calendar year. That was the big problem. We didn't have any ideas against these teams. It was just a case of, right, the good players will see us through. We've got guys like Edward, we've got guys like Forrest, Christie. Surely, if all else fails, somebody will shoot for 35 yards and we'll be totally fine. That's what we saw last season. So the different approach to these games, not just the putting the fear factor back into these games, that's quite important as well, because you don't want teams being encouraged. Don't want Ross County turning up to Celtic Park thinking they can get a result. Don't want St Mirren thinking, well, we can just do what we did last season and win. But the way that it's happening is, again, just very encouraging as well. The fact that we're systematically breaking these teams down that previously, to all intents and purposes, couldn't be broken down because we didn't have anything to do.
They can't do anything about the game we play.
No.
And some team is going somewhere, and it might happen this weekend, might happen this week, come up against Neil Lennon's team, get figured out. Even Brendan Rodgers' team get figured out. All teams get figured out eventually. But I do not think St Mirren had the facilities available to do anything.
Don't think you have the facilities for that, bruv.
I don't think you're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy. And I don't think St Mirren had anything about them that could stop that. I mean, you're talking about the good players seeing us through, Stephen. We've spent, since this podcast started, since he signed, we've been talking about Kyogo. I'm starting to feel sorry for Liel Abada, Melly, because if Kyogo had not been signed, we'd be raving about this lad.
Oh, he's came in and we were all sceptical about him. Dudu Dahan, a lot of money for a Dudu Dahan player, 19 years old. The team he played for at the best. And that's and he's come in here and he's hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And some players take a while to do that, but he just looks another guy built for Ange's system, and it's another guy where he's that young that Ange can mould him into the player he wants him to be. But
so direct. As soon as he gets that ball, he's making a beeline for the full-back.
And this is the thing, that the reason I loved Paddy Roberts so much is because I looked forward to going to see him, because he sort of got me off my seat. Now we've got Abada that can do that. We've got Kyogo that's come in that could do that, and added that to players we already had. There's so many players I want to watch, and Abada's one of them, because yes, he can take players on, he can cross it. That one, Ralston plays him in, he crossed it and Turnbull hit it off the post. That would have been a great goal.
Yeah.
A great goal, one of the best so far this season, but there's so many we can say about that so far. But my favourite thing about him is he's always looking to get in the end of chances, and that is quite rare sometimes for wingers, but every time the ball goes into the box and comes past the penalty spot, he's there. He's there, and I love that. He's going to get on the end of plenty of shots, he's going to get plenty of assists, but most importantly, he's going to get plenty of goals, and that's another double at the weekend for him. He's just flying, and he's missed a couple of games, he's come in and out. Every time he comes in, he slots in seamlessly and contributes.
And one thing we've always said about James Forrest, he played his best football, Stephen, when Paddy Roberts was there. He spent basically all season with no other options with James Forrest on that side. Competition for Forrest.
Yeah, no coincidence. I don't think that these players will bring out the best in players who are already there. Now, of course, it's going to be...
What did I say, Stephen?
What was it? Complacency? Well, no.
Competition
kills complacency. See, I did that. T-shirts on the way with that saying. But our better players over the years... Lustig is another one. Lustig is another one who thrived when he had Adam Matthews next to him, fighting him all the way for a place in the team. I don't think it's anything groundbreaking. It's nothing particularly insightful of us to point out that...
It's groundbreaking for Celtic. It's groundbreaking for us to bring in some
more
competition.
than one good player for every position, or for a number of positions. No, definitely, it can only be a good thing. James Forrest, we know what he's capable of, but you'd never ever want someone too comfortable in their position. That's never a good thing. You don't want to be the only guy of that position at the club. Obviously Ralston is, but they look to have solved that now by bringing in a player. But it's not too much to ask for having a competent player, or two competent players for each position.
What was your favourite goal, Melly? We're not going to go through all six. We can't possibly.
I think it will be Abada's second, because the run inside from Greg Taylor was absolutely brilliant, and he's obviously not had the best start to the season, but he's settled into it, and that ball across for Abada, and I love that type of header. It was just inch perfect. He heads it down and goes over. But I'll give a wee quick mention to the 6-goal Turnbull's one, because of the role Ayeti played in that by the pressing, and again it's another guy that's come on, not a lot of time, but he's doing what he's asked and he's getting the benefits from it.
Hey, Jan Alwick. Save things.
Jan.
Is that what is it?
It's English or something. I don't know.
Is it?
Aye.
Oh, it does.
Have a go at him. Come on.
We are.
Come on. Give me a big stuff.
He'll do it in the text.
Come on. You must be joking.
Jan.
Okay, Jan. I don't get. You know what? It doesn't matter.
Jack.
Jack, is it?
It's a weird spelling. It's JAK.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Well, it's not my fault.
Yak Alnick.
Yak Alnick. Right. Okay.
Yeah, a day to forget for the stopper. Yeah, I mean, he's been all right for some minutes.
Embarrassing. He was at fault for about. I mean, he could have kept about 3 of them out the net.
There was one about my favourite goal. Incidentally,
a hologram in goal.
Was that a Celtic keeper before Joe Hart?
Exactly. I'm surprised they didn't sign him. Actually, could just start collecting these guys. But I mean, there's nothing really left to say about that other than the first goal was horrendous. The day didn't get much better for him, but he made a couple of decent saves actually, and kind of kept it from getting ridiculous probably in terms of scoreline, so he probably deserves credit for that. He's not the first keeper to do that against Celtic, to have an absolute shocker, but also make a few saves to keep it respectable. In that regard, I was actually kind of fuming at the game, because it was another one of those games that promised a 9 or 10-0 and didn't deliver on it. Absolutely disgusting.
It's the N in his surname that's thrown me.
Right, Alnwick.
He's got an Alnwick in his surname. That man again, Joe Hart. We were talking about the leadership qualities. Even Jack was saying that he came over to him at half time to regroup, make saves. Now, that is a good pep talk, right? What I would have said was, look, relax, you've already made an ass of it.
Aye.
Can it get much worse?
Do you think Joe Hart can tell that to Bain and Barkas as well?
Start there. Start with them.
At least start and then move on to Earl. He's probably not even. He's too big. He's big dog then.
It's weird how we tolerate this from the goalkeeping club, though. Imagine that was strikers. Yeah, by the way, what you do is put it in the bottom left corner.
See him? He kind of safety's left. So next time you get an opportunity, just stick it down there. Alan Power, you singled him out for before the game, Steve. We've been on the ends of a few Alan Power challenges in our time. Melee, straight red, no question, up the road, in the bath, see you later.
Yeah, it's one of the only countries, footballing countries, that would debate that. It's a wild challenge, and this is why Scottish football is still in the dark ages of this stuff. It could have been a yellow. It's a straight red all day. The guy flew in. Even when you see the still, and I know stills don't do it, but the ball is miles away. He's just flying in there, and he's walked away as if it's going to be a yellow. Then he's pretending to be shocked, as if this is an outrage. It's a shocking tackle that needs taken out the game, because his team have went a goal down, and the thing about it is, yes, it's a shocking tackle, he should be sent off, but for his teammates to go, you're one of the most experienced, meant to be the experienced guy coming in to help us out, and you've just let us down. You have sold yourself, so you don't need to play. You don't need to play the rest of the match, but we need to come out here against this team that are rampant and play against 10 men, because you just think, fuck this, and it's pathetic from him.
Stephen, you signalled Alan Power, you knew that was coming. Ryan Christie was cited for a similar challenge in the game. There was talk online that probably should have been a red card as well. Not for me, Jeff.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with the comparison being made, because ostensibly they were similar in that they were quite hard challenges on similar areas but the opposite side of the pitch. I don't have a problem with them being compared, because the likely outcome is that, right, we'll compare these two quite similar challenges. That one was a red, that one wasn't. There's your outcome, right? Where I do have a problem is drawing a straight line between the two as if they should have had the same outcome. I think that's ridiculous, and I'm not being, I'm not getting the green tinted glasses on or anything like that here. I'm being objective about it, and I don't see how you could possibly draw the conclusion that they were both straight red cards. I don't have a problem with them being compared, because fair enough, they happened in the same game and they deserve to be spoken about. But that's it. That's really it, as far as I'm concerned.
See, just on that, there's another one where Christie and Sorrow later in the game. It's why I just can't trust Sorrow. Look, mate, it's 6-0 against St Mirren. Why are you getting booked flying into challenges like that? And Christie, and it's not, I don't mind Celtic players going in for challenges, but it's going into the game next week, because even Kyogo, don't give the referee an excuse, because
it's easy
they
to
will
say that, though,
take
isn't it? I'll say that, mate, but it was something I was going to bring up. There was a lot of that in the game for St Mirren players, leaving elbows in, leaving feet in, pushing,
but it's just,
poking, prodding.
It's more a thing building up to next week's game, because no matter who the referee's going to be, it's at Ibrox.
I think next week.
Worse.
There you go.
It's at Ibrox. We won't have any fans there.
I mean, on the refs though, take your pick. I mean, Willie Collin was terrible.
Well, that's what another thing I was going to bring up.
Such an odd wee man, isn't he?
Oh, bizarre, yeah.
Creepy man.
Definitely keeps his socks on and a t-shirt. And a t-shirt. Really.
But taking those green tinted specs off, again, we'll need to bring it up when we're winning. St Mirren had a goal disallowed that was nowhere near offside. You've seen Anthony Ralston, after the goal goes in, sort of scurry up and get online. That's an easy decision for a linesman looking across, and it's again a pathetic decision.
He was probably lost in Anthony Ralston's eyes, though, the linesman. He was probably easily done, as you say. It can't be all positive. Greg Taylor's not good enough. Fight me.
Who's arguing with you?
There you go.
No argument
there, precisely. So, two negatives from that game. Greg Taylor is just, sometimes, Stephen, when I'm doing this podcast, I say things like, I hate to do. I don't hate to do it. It just feels like something I should say. Greg Taylor doesn't listen to this podcast. He doesn't watch. Certainly not a subscriber. Certainly not a Patreon, because we see everyone's name. So I'm going to sit here and say, Greg Taylor, not good enough.
Well, we'll see how you feel when he issues a statement about this podcast.
Start your own podcast.
A teary-eyed podcast.
Do you know, I think he has kind of improved, but I do agree going forward, Celtic...
Do you not think, but every time the play goes down the line, it more often not breaks down when he's in the...
Sometimes, he did get a decent assist in there, and look, I agree with you, the AZ game, he was the one, him and Starfelt were the ones who went, they're maybe a bit out of their depth here. Starfelt, I think, can improve, but I don't think you're going to get that improvement with Greg Taylor, but I think he's done enough in the games to say, do you know what, if we bring in a new left back, he's fine for the guy underneath him, and look, we can do better, but in the scale of things, he's done okay enough to say, look, see if we have to have Greg Taylor as a competition for left back for the rest of the season, fine, until we can get something.
Well, that's it. I mean, he could have in effect moved in the pecking order, but I also thought some of our and it's easy when you're like 4 or 5-0 up, you're not going to be as on top of things as you were, but I felt like some of our passing was quite slack in the game as well.
Yeah, I mean that's bound to happen. It's kind of human nature. As much as I'm joking about the kind of figurative taking the foot off the gas when you're 5-0 up instead of going for the 9 or 10 that the crowd are absolutely baying for. Well, only me really.
Why it so rarely happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's only human nature. I mean, and in a sense, it'd probably be crazy to just go herring after this 9 or 10. I mean,
especially
every goal's
you've got
important.
another game midweek and a game. There's lots of football to be played.
I mean, every goal's important, but that I don't think Ange would be particularly happy about standards slipping in when it comes to passing. I'm not saying you shouldn't or you should go after 9 or 10 goals, but the starting to get a bit wayward with the passing, I don't think is really kind of a good thing to happen. It's really acceptable from the manager's point of view. But again, I don't think we were in any danger at any point. It was it was a total canter the game. So it was again, it is probably just human nature that things start to slip a little bit towards the end of a game. I was completely unmoved by any giving away of the ball.
You said Greg Taylor probably could end up moving down the pecking order if we brought a left back in. We brought in Juranovic, Croatian international right back. We're obviously going to do a scouting podcast on him, patreon.com/20minutetims. Every player that comes in, we have them professionally scouted. We scout report and a podcast to go along with it. That's much needed competition for Anthony Ralston. I don't know how Juranovic is going to get in ahead of him, frankly, on some of these performances.
It's a lot of money to pay for a backup for old Ralstonator, but this is what we need. We can't just go, do you know what, Tony Ralston's played well, he's fine. We need to bring in more quality, because you should see one injury or two away, even like the drop-off with James McCarthy being out, the drop-off from Cal McGregor to Sorrow was stark for me towards the end of the game. So we need these players coming in, and like, Ralston will maybe have a dip in form, or he might fall out the team for a wee bit, because we've seen in his career he might be difficult for him to keep this up. But bringing in a guy of quality of that, this is what Celtic should be doing. This is what we need to be doing. We've known all summer we've needed a right back. We've got one in, and it looks by all intents and purposes to be a bit of a gem. So I can't get enough of good players, so get them in.
We're also linked with Nisbet from Hibs, Stephen, with Lee Griffiths possibly going on the way. Terrific bit of business for Celtic. Basically just paying Lee Griffiths to go go and play for Hibs. And then a Greek striker, his name escaped me as I'm saying these words out my mouth right now.
Georgios Giacomakis, I think his name is. I'm not sure about the pronunciation, but that's basically how it's written, is Giacomakis. So I'll go with that for now.
But if we get Nisbet and Giacomakis, say we get them in, or one or the other we get in, how do you rate the business we're doing in this window so far? Because there was a lot of pressure on Celtic to do decent business. Now, I've had a cursory look at the transfer market. No, hardly anyone's making big moves in terms of quantity of players. I had a look. I think Celtic have signed more first-team players than anyone bar Watford, I think, who signed 11. Who've signed 11 this window. In terms of transfer market liquidity, what they're talking about, big players coming in and out, Celtic got 13 odd million, 15 million for Christopher Ayer, which is that is pretty impressive in itself, given the amount of business and the amount of money that's been spent in the transfer window. Do you feel that Ange has been fully backed, partially backed? Are you happy with the business we've done so far? I think for me it's pretty undeniable that we're doing the deals.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with the deals that have been done. I'm pretty confident in all the players that have been brought in, aside from the ones, I suppose, being counted in that high level of business are players who haven't played yet, like Urhoghide and guys like that, right?
Lawal, Urhoghide and Liam Shaw you can pretty forget about, but Abada, Furuhashi, Carfelt, James McCarthy, and Joe Hart, all first team players. Juranovic will probably be a first team player. Any striker we sign will likely be considered a first team player. Yeah,
depending on what's going on with Yeti and Edward and all that, who I think we expect Edward to probably go in the next week or so. Hopefully not, but I think we'll probably assume he is. By and large, I think the business has been great. The only reservation that most people seem to have is the timing of it, of course, because we've gone out of the Champions League and then signed a load of players. Yeah. I understand that. I think the wheels could have been going in motion a little bit earlier, and we could have got business done sooner. However, I just don't think that can be done across the board. And I think we've seen a couple of examples of what we've been talking about recently. Buta, who we're linked with for a long time, I don't think he's quite signed for Everton yet, but he's been heavily linked to a move to Everton. I think that's what we're up against. I think we are facing that, what I've mentioned a couple of times, the whole agent brinksmanship. Right, we've got an offer, we've got a solid offer here from Celtic. They want you in the door June the 1st, right? We'll get you ready for Champions League qualifiers. Or Everton have been on the phone, they've not put in a bid yet, but there's interest there. If you hold fire for 3 weeks,
that's an
probably
agent's
get you,
job.
That's it. That's
the agent's job.
And that's what I've been saying, and that's what Celtic are up against. So we shouldn't be surprised if that on occasion happens. It's not always a case of, typical Celtic failing to get that over the line, because...
And we're not just backing the club. You're obviously Celtic make mistakes. Celtic make errors, and we've identified that the centre half, case of the centre half, Taylor Ayer can go 1 year ago and not have it, and giving yourself a whole year to get that job done and not doing it is, almost a unique position that Celtic should have had the centre half in by time, because they had a full year to do it. You could point to right back.
Yeah.
We let our right backs go in January. We knew this was a case, and they were really. But you're right. It's there's this notion still that you sort of see as well. Like, if a player's to think about it, then we should just walk away. This is no.
Where do you end up down the list?
Aye, I mean, if these guys need to think about their futures, and it's right. Got a big money call for Celtic for Juranovic. His agent his agent go, do you definitely want to go to Celtic? Do you want me to make a few phone calls, see if I can get Burnley, Southampton? I've got a few contacts in England. Do you want? Yeah, was it Ledger he played for?
Yeah,
we weren't prepared to let him go until they'd played their Champions League qualifiers. So just the assumption, just because he arrives on the 20th of August, it doesn't mean he's been available since the first day the window opened. And you have to look at what other clubs do as well. Like, almost no football club has all their ducks in a row for every player coming in the first week of the window.
Never.
It just doesn't. It just literally does not happen. And I don't know the reason for it, but there's evidently a reason that the transfer window is 2 months long, and most of the business is done by everyone at the end of it.
It's for Jim White's paycheck, innit? That's
not anymore.
Oh no, of course not.
No. He's hung up the yellow tie.
As you say, there's times with Celtic. Well, even Ange said it. We were too hesitant. We could have made deals happening. The thing this season and most seasons is to get through the Michelin ties would have only taken 1 or 2 players in, and that's still the frustration. But if Celtic can get through this week and get into Europa League and get a result against Rangers, we'll forget about all the weeks where we're getting very, very tetchy about the frustrations, the games against Hearts and Michelin, where we're going, come on, we need to get a move on here, because Celtic did have so much to do, but at the same time, that's Celtic's fault for getting themselves into that position. Now, they're trying to address that with the new manager, the new CEO, and fair play to them, but we could have done things better. But see if like Celtic, if they sign a striker, if they sign Scales, the left back, and we maybe get another centre half, you're looking at it and going, oh wait, see every position I wanted Celtic to address, they've actually done it.
How much did we spend on Juranovic?
2.5.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm just looking at some of these fees here. 4 million for Starfield, 4.6 for Furuhashi, 3.4 for Liel Abada. I mewe could end up spending 20 million quid in this window.
Yeah,
and that's not even including the change we've spent on the likes of Shaw, Urugide and Lawal.
But that's pretty much the minimum we had to spend, because we got ourselves in such a mess. But at least it's all been addressed. And
I'm not sitting here saying everything's perfect, by the way, and the board are doing a great job. But what I'm saying is,
it just shows you what the results do. See if we were losing losing a game here or there, or we lost that tie against Alkmaar last week. We need to get these players in, but we're battering teams domestically, and we're doing well in Europe. If we can get through the next 2 games without any losses, we're looking good, and you feel we can only get better. So if everything's going well on the pitch, everything else falls into place. If things aren't going well on the pitch, that's when things get frustrating, and things are going well on the pitch, so we can't complain, and it just feels like Celtic are going somewhere now. But there's still a couple of players we could do with.
Neil Lennon was in the news recently. He was on Sports Sound. I know, look, he was on Sports Sound and he was talking about it's self-evident that the performances have improved because the fans are back, and he believed that. He was a question was put to Neil Lennon that I thought was unfair, and the premise was, why were the players not playing for you last season but they're playing for Ange this season? And he says, I take exception to that theory that they weren't playing for me now and they're playing for Ange. He goes, the year before they were incredible for me. We beat Lazio, we won a treble, but when the lockdown came, it affected the players. We were in the midst of a pandemic. Players were coming into the club And after being told Glasgow was a great city and there would be big crowds and a nice social life, they had absolutely none of that. I'm going to take issue with what you did there, Stephen, because I've seen a lot
social life.
I've seen a lot of it online.
It's important to learn it.
Yeah,
Look,
sure
social
is.
life's important
Oh,
to the
of course it
players.
is,
Come
aye.
on, let's not dismiss it.
You don't sell that to the. Don't go come to Glasgow. You've got a cracking social life, though.
Ah,
I mean,
you do.
No, when you say there's good places to eat, there's plenty to do.
There's players are not. Do you not think like the life outside football is important to football?
No, of course it is,
Well, of
but
course
no,
it
I mean,
is. So
Why do you go on holiday to places? Because
it's definitely a thing.
Nando's and tenants.
Hey, nothing wrong with Nando's and tenants, man. He was then asked about Odsonne Edouard. They said you could tell in pre-season that his body language wasn't with us. I think he was in the mindset that his representatives that a move was in the offing. He was sought after by everyone, but when the pandemic came, we had one bid for Odsonne, and it was nowhere near the valuation of the players. Now, don't want to spend too much time talking about this because it just brings us back onto last season, which is something we're trying to avoid. But I kind of took issue with some of the response that I've seen online, because a lot of the response, Aki's talking shit, Aki's talking rubbish. It's like dismissing fully and entirely everything that Neil Lennon says. It's all your fault. You're just a terrible manager, and all these things that you've talked about, the pandemic, about that's like, how dare he blame Odsonne Edouard? For me, there's no value. If we're trying to understand what happened last season, there's no value in just completely dismissing everything Neil Lennon says out of hand. For example, I can believe Odsonne Edouard maybe thought he was getting a move last season. We all kind of thought Odsonne Edouard was getting a move last season. I can maybe buy into the theory that the players just didn't down tools for Neil Lennon last season, and they're playing for Ange now. There might be a bit more than that. But at the same time, Melon, it's you spoke offline. I just wish Neil Lennon would stop talking about this, because he's never taken responsibility.
No,
he's pointing to everything else. And he's well within his rights to fight his corner. He's well within his rights to try and build up his reputation again as a manager. And every time he opens his mouth, he's obviously going to point to the positive things that he achieved as Celtic manager. But just either takes some responsibility for it, or stop talking about it.
that's the problem, isn't it? Is the responsibility thing. And look, I don't doubt that last season was difficult for Neil Lennon. Of course it was. Nobody's ever had to go through the things. No manager's had to go through that. It's just something you can't be prepared for. It's just something that happens in our lifetime. But to go from that and just go, well, fans are back, that's all the difference. Like, no, it's not, because you can see by watching this team, they know what they're doing. They've got a style.
That was
Neil
that
Lennon,
to me as well. Was like, why are you saying it's self-evident that fans are back, things have improved? Why are you not giving the new manager any credit here either?
And that's the problem, because he's just coming out and saying, that's all the difference. But if fans had been in the stadium last year, he would have been hounded out months before he got. The only reason he kept his job because fans weren't there, and it had to go to protest. And look, Lennon's probably got a bit of, the board haven't done what they should have. I've heard things where I thought, look, do you know what, that sounds as if it could be true. But for Neil Lennon to come out and just say, look, this and that and this and that, you have to caveat that with, I made mistakes too, I could have done things better. But the whole thing I always find now is, if Celtic don't play well under Ange, they can go, right, we know the system, it maybe just wasn't our day or we made mistakes. If Celtic don't play well under Neil Lennon, it's the players need to do better. Not we need to do better, the system, we need to work on that. It's the players, it's always the players.
There's no responsibility taken. And I mean, Neil Lennon's approach, Stephen, I'm right, am I right? He just needs to stop talking about it.
Aye, and what you're saying about people jumping on the back of this and saying, oh, he's just talking pish, that nothing he says rings true, that wouldn't happen if he took any responsibility whatsoever. The fact that he doesn't do that is why people are so angry about it.
If you're Neil Lennon's PR man, what are you telling him? You've got sports,
Well,
so you're like, Neil Lennon, he's lined up for Sports Sound. They're going to be talking to him about Ange. They're going to be talking to him about Celtic this season. He needs prepped. He needs answers, Stephen. What direction do you give Neil Lennon? You're his PR guy now.
right.
Phone in sick.
Aye, basically. I get it. I understand why he's doing this. I understand why he is, not why he's just sort of relieving of himself of any responsibility for the season, because I think that's ridiculous, quite frankly. For a manager to say the difference between a good Celtic team and losing the league by 25 points as fans is frankly absurd, and it's insulting, to be perfectly honest.
And he's already insulted the fans last
Aye,
season.
and that's it. That's not this interview specifically, right? I think the previous one on
They're all
Sports
more or less the same.
they are quite similar, but in previous iterations of this, there's been quite a a go at the fans and their entitlement, and not using that word, but he did actually.
It was very close to that, wasn't it?
He walked right up to the line of saying that they're entitled and then just didn't cross over it. There was the chat that we were unhealthily obsessed with 10 in a row, and I'm like, well, the only reason you had the job was because everyone was obsessed with 10 in a row. That was your sole qualification for the job, was that you knew what it took and all that kind of stuff. I understand now that he's trying to rescue or salvage his reputation, his public reputation, because that's not good. He doesn't have a good reputation. No. He is a guy who, and I'm going to be quite blunt about this, he's a guy who is too closely associated with being unprofessional and drinking and stuff like that. We look at the timeline of last season. I don't think it was particularly fair to call Neil Lennon some of the things that he was called when he got the job, like
ginger twat,
you beardy twat, absolutely
chubby
fabulous
manager.
But the stuff you hear about him, like drinking and all that kind of stuff, that would go away very quickly if it wasn't for the fact that he kept every time he's too closely associated with it. So there was the Dubai thing. The first thing anyone sees of the Dubai trip is them bevying, right? And then in 2 minutes after he's lost the job, he's steaming and getting in fights with stuff. Yeah. And it's totally unfair to judge the guy's personal life on these bases. But for everyone who thought that all along, everyone's just like, well, of course. There he goes.
Cloud of unprofessionalism sort of follows Neil Lennon.
Exactly. And now he has to fix that. If he's ever going to get another job in football, he has to put that right. And that's what he's doing. He's trying to fix the PR.
Some fun runs.
It's helping old ladies cross the street outside tenants and stuff like that. Right? So I get what he's doing. I just wish it wouldn't come at the expense of logic and blaming the fans and blaming the players and blaming everything else, because we're not buying it. Some Sheffield United or whoever he's trying to get a job with might swallow this stuff, but I've lost it. Much like I said with Gordon Strachan, I've lost interest in hearing for the guy for now, to be perfectly honest. I'm sick of it.
Neil Lennon failed to beat Rangers melee last season. We never beat Rangers last season. Ange Postecoglou is coming up to play the Huns this weekend. I thought when the fixture list came out, oh no.
Yep.
When I saw this, now I'm thinking if Ange beats the Huns and gets us into Europe, I'm just going to call him Daddy.
It's get that way. Like, even if Celtic lose to Rangers, I still think I'll just call him Dad instead of Daddy, but I'll still get there at some point. We'll get there at some point. But look, the love for Ange, for Kyogo, in such a short space of time. We sat here 3-4 weeks ago and like, oh dear, this is bad. But
just on Kyogo, did you know a bus full of potentially coked up Rangers fans were being racist about him?
All right, detour.
I was shocked.
Detour into this, right? We're not
going to spend too much time in this.
No, but
I mean, I was shocked.
Racism storm enveloped Scottish football once again. Yeah, I have to admit that when I first, and we'll go back to the point you were trying to make there, Melly, sorry, it's just that Jamie has brought this up and we probably should address it because it is important, but my initial reaction to this was one of complete apathy, right? And I'll explain what I mean by that. For one to be outraged at anything, there has to be an element of surprise. Yeah. You have to be surprised by something in order to be outraged by it. And I just saw it and I thought, well, obviously.
For me, it was the most obvious thing in the world.
I'll pose imagine my shot.
Yes. I'll pose this scenario to both of you guys. Just a completely hypothetical game here. Just a wee thought experiment. I'm going to take the worst people imaginable.
Yeah.
People who belong on the very fringes of society, the worst elements of public life. I'm going to put them all in a container, let's say a bus, for example, right?
Right.
I'm going to add elements of alcohol, probably cocaine as well. And let's see what happens. They're going to be singing songs.
Also, there's another element: a high-profile, very successful foreign footballer.
Are the songs going to be A, very racist indeed, B, not at all racist, or C, looks racist but is taken out of context? Which one? I'll give you a clue before you answer. Before you give it too quick an answer. Celtic have recently signed a man whose physical appearance is not the same as theirs. Now, is it going to be A, B, or C?
I'm going to go for, I forgot which order they were in, but the one that was very racist.
Right, A. So section A, yes. Okay, see this stuff. It's utterly depressing, but at the same time, completely unsurprising.
It's a mess. Yeah. We've got a friend in the group chat who made a great point. He's a Rangers fan, and he says, "I'm going to I thought I would stop.
Cut that out.
Stop going to Ibrox, right?" Because he goes, "I was at Ibrox." He goes, "Whilst the players are taking the knee, the stands are ringing out with songs of bigotry, and they're travelling to the games singing racism, and they're standing with Glenn Kamara while these players. It's a hot mess. The Rangers support is a hot mess, and we knew it was coming. And do you know what? On a serious point, this all started again, right? This very vocal and vociferous racism with Scott Sinclair. Do you remember?
Yeah.
All that started pre-season in Scott Sinclair with those banners at the games that were playing against Linfield, and the Rangers fans picked it up. And I said in this podcast, Scott Sinclair is the canary in the coal mine. You need to, if they came down hard at that point, when it raised its head again with Scott Sinclair, we wouldn't be having this conversation now, because it's sort of treated with kid gloves. But anyway, it was the most, as you say, Millie, the most unsurprising, obvious thing, and that it was always going to happen. And Rangers have taken the tickets off us because they're crap at the moment. And anyway, back to the point you're making, if you can remember it.
Yeah, it was a shocker from the club built on hate. I didn't expect it. Talking about Ange going there, this is a good opportunity for Celtic. Again, it's another week where we get to see what Celtic are made of again. We've got 2 tough games, but if you had said to me 3 weeks ago, Alkmaar away, Rangers away, I'd be like, oh no. Now I'm like, bring it on. I can't wait for every Celtic game, every game we go into. I think we can win, I think we can score, and we can play well. Now, we might not get the results, as I say, in these games, but I still feel once this week's out the way and we get back after the international break, we're going to see Celtic. We're going to see what Celtic are made of, and we're going to have group stage games. We're going to have league games. The games are going to be coming thick and fast.
Rangers have got a difficult try. They've got a difficult trip to Alashkert, which is in Armenia, if I remember correctly. That flight isn't going to be kind to them.
No, hopefully not.
It's really bumpy.
really bumpy, hot and sweaty as well. Lots of farts in there, and they're playing as well. You know what these flights are like. A lot of men, a lot of protein farts on there. But exactly what I said up front, and this exactly how we opened this podcast, is that I said this is going to be the real test for me. That's just my personal opinion. I'm not saying it's a bigger test in terms of quality over Alkmaar, but what I think is that we'll learn more from what we do against Rangers than any other fixture so far, because we don't set ourselves against Rangers. It's just that's the easiest comparison to make with what we've seen before.
Always a marker. That first Glasgow derby is always a marker,
especially with how it's been going. We've lost the upper hand in these games quite some time ago, and we're not getting the results anymore. It went from totally dominating them to beating them, but starting to lose that kind of killer instinct against them, starting to lose the total domination that we once had, to just plain getting gubbed off them at the end of last season. So this, to me, is when we will know a lot about this team. Like, I'm not saying if we happen to not get a result in this game, then the season's over. Not at all. I just think we'll know where Celtic truly stand in terms of their development going forward.
But see, when we find out where Celtic stand right now, we'll probably go into this game without Juranovic won't start the game. Yeah. We might have a left back and we might have a striker. So even if we lose this game, we've still got things to improve on going forward. So it is a bit of a marker, but Celtic can get better from there. But see, if you were working for Sky or whoever sorts of contracts with Sky, would you not go? Me, mate? Of course not. Making a shitload out of podcasts. Would you not go to Rangers? Like, what are you doing? How can we sell a game where there's no away fans? That's a disgrace. Like, you've already taken down from... Are
Sky allowed to do that? They paid their 25 grand to Rangers.
That's it. So you've got Sky. Well, I think Sky, because they're part of the TV, they'll need to get access like UEFA and that. But so the BBC can't speak about...
I think they're only using old photos of Rangers as well. It's a mess.
See the BBC, their mugs as well. Just don't talk about them and then see how it goes. But with Sky as well, what I mean is, imagine this is the biggest derby in the world. We have one of the biggest derbies live. But you're not getting any away fans because
come and listen to 90 minutes of racism and sectarian abuse. By the way, the Rangers players definitely clap when they play in lands. Definitely clap when they play.
Definitely, and they all stand up as soon as it lands as well, and block the entire area. They all do that as well. But see the away tickets thing. Also, see, before we move on, see if you think...
I'm going to explain what it is in case people don't know. So, Rangers rescinded Celtic's away allocation after Celtic couldn't give them cast iron guarantees that Rangers would get an away allocation in January. Obviously, with COVID and all that, Celtic felt they couldn't give cast iron guarantees. Me, personally, I would have just told them aye.
You wing it?
Yeah.
Just
And then
fake it
come
until you get
January, you know, tell your story walking, COVID, you can't get in.
Aye, exactly. We were worried about that at the time. We've missed that opportunity. But the tickets thing started a couple of seasons ago now. And
Pathetic,
yeah, and what I said about it at the time is that Rangers, desperate to cling on to this old firm thing, right, that Celtic have long given up on. Fans don't really want to hear it anymore. Rangers are the ones who are desperate to cling on to this, but also they're cutting their own legs off when it comes to actually developing this as a fixture, or like getting it back to how they perceive the good old days of the old firm was, because what makes it what it is the rivalry, is the fans and all that. So to me it seems like a crazy
so
move.
petty and really honestly pathetic. And you know, you see some people online, Celtic fans online, saying Celtic should just give Rangers their full allocation and get ours. Rangers don't want Celtic fans in the ground.
No.
That's why. So if we gave them their full allocation, they would still turn around and go, well, you're not getting yours. They don't want it. They're just cutting their nose off despite their faces. We have full match build up every away game this season. Obviously home games, being season ticket holders, we go to the games, so it's very difficult to do the live build up before the games. But we're doing live build up for all away games this season. Patreon.com/20minute-tims. That's a unique piece of content for the all-in tier. We will also have a reaction, maybe a live reaction, live podcast. We're trying to work on the logistics of that, but there will definitely be a live reaction of some description to the game on Patreon. And we're in discussion to produce a special piece of content just for this game as well. So keep your eye on our Twitter feed and all our Patreon. Is there anything, Stephen, you'd like to say before we wrap up?
What a way to put me on the spot there. No, is there any other business? No, just I'm looking forward to the trip to the Death Star at the weekend.
I'm really looking forward to this, Stephen. I'm looking forward to us. Right, good. The nerves, and not going into this game with just a miserable feeling that we're going to get pumped, but going in with those excited, nervous nerves again.
Yeah, and see a final point on what we've been unfortunately forced to talk about a few minutes ago. See the
Lennon.
See if you think that's over with, you forget it. No, see if you think that Rangers fans being punished for what happened in any way is going to dampen how much of an absolute horde of scum they're going to be at this game.
Do you think we should just be racist back?
Fight fire with fire. That's
a joke. That was a joke.
We've been forced into this. But no, I mean, we're joking about this because, you know, it's in our nature. But these,
daft podcast,
exactly. So it's unfortunately it's either, you know, it's the laugh or cry. It's the gallows humour. It's a very depressing situation to be forced to speak about on our football podcast. But I think this fixture was always going to be bad now that the fans are back and now that Celtic fans aren't going to be there. But now that this storm has engulfed Scottish football once again this week, I can only see it getting worse. If you think they're going to take that line down, if they think they're going to be like, well, consider us told, authorities, the beaks have got us told, we are going to be on our best behaviour, think again.
Melly, final thoughts?
No one likes them, but they do care. But I was just looking there just to catch the date, but it's only 23rd. But maybe in about 9 days, when the window shuts, we'll have a real idea of where Celtic are. We'll know the squad, we'll know how they get on in these two games, and quite frankly, I can't wait to see what's in store.
It's almost going to be time for bold predictions, guys. We're going to team that up in a couple of weeks' time, I think.
Bold predictions, where we all take 3 bold predictions at the beginning of the season and review them at the end. If you're a new listener, I'm the best at it. And on that bombshell, we shall wrap up. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. Leave some comments on the YouTube. Subscribe, press the bell. Don't know what the bell does, but thank you for watching. Leave us a review on iTunes as well. If you're listening on your phone, please leave us a review on iTunes. Melly, would you like to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Stephen, would you like to say goodbye?
I would. Enjoy the game, folks. We'll be right back here on Monday to talk about it, however it goes.
What an episode next Monday's going to be.
Yeah.
Wow.
Explosive stuff. Unmissable.
One for the ages. Thank you for listening and watching.